Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Welcome to the Yahoo Sports NFL Podcast. I am Yahoo senior NFL writer Terez Paylor. Here, my main man and fellow senior NFL writer Charles Robinson. And we'd like to welcome you all to our very first live stream. Thanks for joining us. And Charles, are you full after a buffet of football this weekend?
Yeah, it was a great weekend. I as happy as I was with most games, other than maybe like Bears, the Bears performance.
Yeah.
I look at next week's games, and this is going to get better. I mean, it was great. I thought it was a great opening slate. And Nickelodeon, honestly, I'm sure we're going to end up talking about Nickelodeon. I did not want to like it, and I switched over, and I stayed. Like I couldn't get away from it.
I was on Twitter just like you, and I'm like, man, there's a lot of positive things being said about this Nickelodeon game. Let me see. And it's not very often, like, people give credit or say positive things to the NFL on Twitter, especially about like a pure money grab and like viewership grab, which was what that was. They were trying to get like a lower audience, but it was a really good broadcast. They weren't condescending. They and some of the graphics were actually kind of cool. I was actually in on the slime end zones. I thought that was fun.
Yeah, I thought it was different. And Dawn wasn't home, but I thought to myself, like, she would dig this. Like because there was like the little explainers and, just certain elements of it that, as you said, it wasn't condescending, explaining sort of the game. At one point, I thought Nate Burleson was great, by the way.
He was ununbelievable.
Oh, he was so good.
Natural with his he was like laying out the examples of what things are like. He was really good at that.
Yeah. When he went through the progressions, when he talked about, okay, he's going through his progressions and then he dotted it off. I thought to myself, like, yeah, you know what? If Dawn was here right now, she'd dig this because there's a lot of like jargon that I use that she has no idea what I'm talking about.
No chance. And honestly, like, I think the world could use a little bit of fun right now. And it was a fun thing to see, man. And that was cool to see. And I think, in the future, people will be more receptive to that. And especially because that game needed it. Okay, I wrote off that game. Like, that game needed it. And we'll talk about that in a second. Let's start talking about an interesting game, though, a fun one that you wrote about, right? The Cleveland Browns have their first playoff win since 1994, beating the Pittsburgh Steelers on the road 48-37. An extraordinary win, not just because they broke a lot of curses here and a lot of SOB, same old Brown stuff. They did this without their head coach on the sideline.
Yep.
They did this without Bill Callahan, one of the league's best offensive line coaches, on the field. They did this without Joe Bitonio, one of the league's best guards in football, Denzel Ward, Ronnie Harrison. Like, man, if there was ever a game that they would lose, it's this one. And they found a way to do it. It felt a lot like how the Chiefs broke their curse like 5 years ago, their playoff curse 5 years ago against the Texans. And the Browns, the best thing, they didn't even have to sweat it out, did they? 28-0 first quarter lead. What were you thinking as you were seeing that?
Well, and remember, they lost Jack Conklin, during the course of this game, who's an all-pro right tackle. I mean, you can't lose two linchpins of the offensive line. I thought when Pittsburgh put the run on, you get a little nervous there because if you're a Browns fan, because you're like, we've kind of seen this before. And as soon as the momentum shifts, are the Browns going to be able to step up and make the plays that were necessary? And I think, like, when I go back and watch it again, that snap going over Ben's head, Roethlisberger's head, the first play of the game, and Ben kind of making a business decision at the goal line. If you watch that close, like, he Cam Newton'd it in the Super Bowl. Remember, Cam Newton was kind of like, I don't know if I'm gonna jump on that fumble. That's what Ben did. And I thought, even though you look at the stats, and this is what I end up writing, when you look at the stats, Ben filled it up and he threw 4 touchdown passes, but the 4 picks were horrendous. Absolutely. And I would say, like, people who watch a broadcast, what's always interesting, and you and I, we have the ears for it because we kind of know how TV production works. Chris Collinsworth, I thought this was really interesting. Chris Collinsworth was talking about how much Pittsburgh's offense had changed, and they used to be this running team, and they started off as a running team this year and they switched to this passing offense, and it all leaned into Ben in the short passing game. And he kind of said at one point, and I'm paraphrasing here, that he was like, I don't really know why that happened. I think Chris probably knows why that happened. He just couldn't say it. And the truth is, Randy Fichtner, the offensive coordinator, I think had a lot to do with that. Ben Roethlisberger's limitations had a lot to do with that. And I think the Pittsburgh Steelers are seeing like, okay, this is it. This is the pivot point. And I personally think if Matt Stafford is a guy who is on the table for them, that is a natural get for the Steelers in this offseason.
And that would give Stafford an opportunity to play for a franchise that like has it together.
Yep.
Like we know that defense is going to come back next year.
Yep.
We know that they're probably going to prioritize enforcing the offensive line. But to me, though, I want to focus on this specific game and my issues with it from the Pittsburgh Steelers perspective, starting here. Your quarterback's 38 years old, okay? Like, so what happens when a quarterback gets that age? Well, when teams are still competitive, in general, it's a different type of offense, okay? Where was the run game? They couldn't establish a run. When was the last time Pittsburgh couldn't establish a run? They ran for 52 yards. And I know they were down a lot early, but 68 attempts, like breaking Steve Young's playoff record, that's an insane amount of playoff attempts for any quarterback, let alone a 38-year-old quarterback coming off elbow surgery.
Right.
How about this? And we've talked about this. If your quarterback is going to be older and he's not – and he's going to struggle pushing it down the field consistently because they can never really get that going, your defense had better be awesome. And yes, they lost Bud Dupree, but there's no excuse for this. Baker Mayfield threw the ball 34 times yesterday. No quarterback pressures, no quarterback sacks, no interceptions, no forced fumbles. Their defense let them down. Their play calling let them down. Their quarterback let them down, period. And guess what? Mike Tomlin knows all that, right? Because he's into being pretty honest about it. So they got to look at, if Ben comes back because he's got a big cap number, how are we going to adjust how we play? Because it's coming out and throwing it short, 30 to 40 times a game thing. Right. That's not how. And I think that wore down his arm, honestly. He does not look as good now as he did earlier this season. You need to run the football. You need to establish that part. And I'm not taking responsibility off Ben. Like, I hear you. Like, he got to be better. 100%. But I also feel like this was a collective breakdown on multiple levels for Pittsburgh. And that's, if you're looking at this and you're Tomlin, you say, okay, we have to change our offensive philosophy now if this guy comes back. Right. Period. In the story.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, that's exactly right. And part of what I love about playoff football, and you know this as well as I do, is you get a large portion of leagues not playing. So you have all these people available who are watching playoff games. Front offices are watching playoff games. Coaches are watching playoff games. And these people, scouts, are watching playoff games. And they start texting you as you're all watching the same games. They see you tweeting about a certain game, and then they start to kind of chime in because they know you have your eyeballs on that game. And when I had someone, a league source, hit me up and was like, start talking about Ben and how he looked. And he said, he looks like Phillip Rivers out there. And that's not to despair. Phillip had a great playoff game, but I think the point was, it's how we sort of saw the sunsetting of Phillip's career coming. How is
different?
Yes, his accuracy changed downfield. His decision-making at times changed downfield. And one of the points that this guy made, he's like, look at him throwing outside the hash marks. He's like, watch this really closely. Watch him throwing outside the hash marks and watch his accuracy when he throws deep. He's having significant accuracy issues, and that's because he's pushing the ball and it's fatiguing his arm. And as the game went on, as you saw, he graduated to 40 and 50 attempts. And I'm watching, I'm like, wow, this is significant. You can see the ball placement's horrible. And as you said, I mean, that's just something that, Pittsburgh's going to have to figure out how to grapple with. Now, I don't want to just kill Pittsburgh here too, because by the way, Cleveland, good God, like that first quarter, there are a lot of turnovers. But
say it, Charles. They were the physically tougher football team.
Yeah, absolutely.
Period.
Yeah.
They out-physical Pittsburgh, okay?
The first half for sure. Absolutely.
Shout out to the Browns for that. Like, they came out, they went on the road against a team that had bullied them to a stunning degree for a decade. Up until this season, up until this game, the Steelers had won 17 straight home games against Cleveland. Okay, so like kudos under those guys for coming out and saying, you know what, we're going to take it to you because we're tougher than you up front. How about this on both sides of the ball? So if you're Pittsburgh, you get that fixed, first of all, this offseason, because that's not okay. And that's going to get you beat in that division. All right. That division is a physical division, and it's about physicality, and Cleveland's not going anywhere. So it's about they're put it this way, Charles. They are closer defensively to having that mentality than they are offensively. I don't know how you fix that offensive line that quickly this offseason.
Look, I'm just going to tell you the first half. If you take look at the last 10 years of these two teams, that first half, it was like they switched jerseys. Because that first half, Cleveland felt like Pittsburgh. They're running the ball. They're power running the football. They're grinding. They're forcing turnovers on defense. And, look, that's not a good secondary. Cleveland's going to address that in the offseason. The pass rush significantly missed Olivier Vernon. I would expect Cleveland to address that in the offseason. And so it just that first half, I thought to myself, it looked like the baton passing. You sort of see okay, Cleveland's got this together. There's confidence here. You can see them, they get off to a big lead. And then when the counterpunch came, Cleveland was able to rise up and respond. These are all the things that you and I talked about over the course of the season. Cleveland was building these steps, figuring out how to win games when you're not at your best, or you are against different talent level teams, when you lose guys to injuries or, hey, COVID. Your coach isn't, a part of this game. And I can tell you right now, there were times watching this game where I thought they got to be running the football right now. And they're throwing out of empty backfield sets, shotgun formations. I'm like, there's no way Kevin Stefanski at some point wouldn't have gone, nah, we're not going to just keep dealing from shotgun this entire time. We got to move back to the run. Even if that means maybe a little bit of a lack of success here, we have to get closer to what our identity is in that second half. I think you could see Stefanski's presence being missed a little bit there, but I think it's absolutely a wonderful job by the Browns. I think Andrew Berry, they talked about him at the end of the game there, has done a fantastic job with the Browns. And I will say this, John Dorsey, I'll say this because he's up for, I guarantee you there are teams looking at him for a personnel job. When it comes to some of the talent additions that he made for the Cleveland Browns, okay, Kareem Hunt's a big one, okay? That's a huge one. I will say that Dorsey did a good job adding to this team, and Andrew Berry was able to come in and work with that talent and really accentuate it. Didn't pick the right coach, obviously, and did not, ward inside the – he ward inside the franchise, and he leaned into the bad tendencies of the Cleveland Browns. But I'll say from a talent acquisition standpoint, I know why the Eagles have spent time working with John Dorsey the last couple of years.
I've consistently said this for 2+ years. John Dorsey can evaluate talent. There's no doubt about that. The man knows how to evaluate talent. There's some other stuff that has led to him being dismissed from these other places. In Cleveland, it was picking the wrong guy to be his head coach. That'll get you fired in a lot of places. But But when he can get in that film room and watch prospects and watch he knows who can play and who can't play, period. That guy can't evaluate talent. One other thing I wanted to mention here, too, is that I think the Browns did have motivation. And one more time, lo and behold, is words uttered by Juju Smith-Schuster, who didn't mean to do it, obviously. It was repeating like Tomlinisms, but phrased it the wrong way, and the Browns took it and ran with it. Said the Browns going to be the Browns. Baker Mayfield, Myles Garrett, Kareem Hunt all said after the game that mattered to them. Now, we've gone back and forth on this. The pregame dancing, I don't think that matters, but this is different. These are quotes. These are a lot, and we've seen teams do this for years. All right. I do think that motivated them. And I'm reasonably certain we'll probably see a different Juju going forward as far as what he says, because there's been too much other stuff away from the game, just on things he's saying and doing that other players are saying is motivating them, and they can't have that. And I'm sure look, the Browns, they took it and ran with it. And they are going to be the Browns, not just this year, but in the future. That team is better built to be good over the next couple of years than Pittsburgh is.
Listen, the motivation aspect of the playoffs, it is biblical, the levels that coaching staffs go to.
They can take anything.
Anything. I mean, look, we're going to end up talking about, Rams Seahawks, okay? And the cigars. Oh, they were smoking cigars. We're going to get to that. But you and I, for years and years, I told I remember all those years going into the Patriots locker room, and it was just this constant manufacturing
to be here.
Beat it. And then you think of the moments where you don't have to manufacture it. Like somebody actually gives you something to run with. That's a disaster. So I if there was a criticism, I know Mike Tomlin got criticized for the punt. Okay, I get it. The 4th and 1 situation in the fourth quarter. Like, I understand that. But I would say that it's, there are times where I feel like he's got to do a better job of quelling some of the things that go on inside the locker room, some of the things that guys get involved in. And I'm not putting it on him, but I'm just saying there's always, we've talked about, it's always like some drama in Pittsburgh at times where like there's always some people doing something that becomes some kind of an outside storyline. And I thought that those days were over. I thought all those guys were off the roster, and yet we're back here.
It's been a lot better the last couple of years. It has been better.
Okay, it has been better. I mean, it's been better, yeah.
But like, I feel you. It's just kind of like you kind of remember in the past a little bit. But hey, you know what, Charles? Let's move on to the next game. Speaking of remembering the past, the New Orleans Saints on a little bit of a roll right now. They're trying to run it. They're trying to run back the Super Bowl win from a decade ago, and they've got one win under the belt in the playoffs. They beat the Chicago Bears 21-9. And I wrote about this game. And listen, first of all, I can say this. We mentioned on the podcast last week, the Bears only beat one team with a winning record this season, okay? And with Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara coming back, this was going to be a hard ask. But very rarely in football, you and I always talk about the prove-it seasons. Very rarely in football do you get the prove-it games where a game can be a total referendum. And you know this going into it. On a quarterback's entire tenure somewhere.
Right.
Doesn't happen that often. Think of Jameis Winston in week 16 last year. The Bucs are out of playoff contention. They're 7-7, and they're trying to finish with a winning record, and he throws 4 interceptions. You just know it's over, right?
Right.
Here we go. They're facing a good defense that can take away the Bears' lone offensive strength, which is the run, okay? So guess what that means? Trubisky's going to have to win in the pocket. And if Mitchell Trubisky can't win in the pocket, the Bears are going to lose this football game. You, me, everyone knows this coming in. So what happens? He ends up struggling on third down. The Bears go 1 for 10 on third down. I think on 10 of those were dropbacks. And he gets a garbage time touchdown late. But again, he struggles to throw in the pocket and win in the pocket when it matters. And while the New Orleans, look, he didn't get help. Javon Wims dropped a touchdown that could have very easily helped them in this game. Like, that could have changed some of the momentum. But at the end of the day, it's just a reinforcement of what we had been seeing for the last 3 years. Right. Mitchell Trubisky said after the game, hey, listen, I could see myself back here. I personally can't. I think that would be a mistake. Everybody needs to move on. They need a fresh start. He needs a fresh start. And maybe he can pull a Ryan Tannehill, maybe, but that's going to have to be somewhere else in an offense just like that, where the zone run and power run is featured, and he can play action off that and use his mobility after it. That's where I'm at. Where are you at?
Yeah, I'm look, there's no doubt he needs a fresh start. Okay, like, you can't, as you said, this is a referendum. It's not just a referendum for the coaching staff. It's a referendum for that town, the fan base. I lived in Chicago for a long time. I can tell you, it's like a Philly. It's like a there's a New York. I mean, they just don't forget things like this. Like when Mark Sanchez was done in New York, he was done in New York. And
there's certain places guys got to go.
Yeah, and
Chicago is one of them.
Yeah, I would say Trubisky, this is definitely a situation where they need a break. They need a fresh start. And, we'll see how this all plays out with, the general manager, the head coach. I think there's going to be a lot that ends up going into this decision. And I keep bringing this up, but I don't remember the last time you had the plethora of options out there in terms of quarterbacks. You want to get a young quarterback? Well, guess what? 4 or 5 guys are going to go in the first round this year, and you're going to have the ability to go get a guy to either groom him or, hey, start fresh right away with him as your cornerstone. There's going to be veteran guys. I mean, there's going to be guys who are going to get cut loose, okay, for salary cap decisions, and they're going to be available. There are going to be some veteran guys that are going to be on the trade market. So, the ability to rethink your quarterback position, if you don't take advantage of that right now, and we get into next season and everybody's sitting there. So I'll give you an example, like the Patriots. If we go into next season and we're having this same conversation about the Patriots that we're having right now, that's on Bill. Like straight up, that's on Bill. Like either you solve it this offseason because you got the ability to solve it, or you make the personnel mistake and that gap is on you. So whatever gap there is next year for a team, if they didn't at least attempt to address it properly, that's going to be on the front office and the coaching staff. So I think that's sort of where Chicago is here. Just to lean back into New Orleans, I thought what was really striking yesterday was I wasn't aware until I saw the stat of the number of snaps that Alvin Kamara, Michael Thomas, and Brees had all played together. And now I forget the numbers. It was something insane, like 57 or 60 or 65. It was like right in that range all season long, which is stupid. That's like one game. That's a game of offensive snaps, basically, for three guys to be on the field together. I think that makes a huge difference for this team. But I was surprised that given the way Trubisky played and given the mistakes that were made at times, that this wasn't a more spread out game than it was. Like I thought the Saints really should have commanded this a little bit more than they actually did. And, that leaves me with a little bit of trepidation. Now, obviously they go and we're going to see him play Tom Brady again. And Brady's, ran into a wall a couple of times against the Saints this year. So we'll see if that continues on. But I had hoped for them. I'd hoped that the Saints would stretch their legs a little bit more. And I know that, Chicago's a really good team defensively. But again, if this is going to be the Super Bowl representative for the NFC, you're going to have to be better offensively than that because everybody else is.
It's kind of hard to square those two things away too, because on one hand, like the Bears were like really getting after Brees.
Yeah, they were.
It was like 9 pressures in the first, and we know that's what you want to do. And they only trail 7-3 at halftime. But on the other hand, you look at Brees' final stat line. A, it looks really good. B, he had 9 third down completions. That's the most he's had in a game in 4 seasons. Plus the Saints possessed the ball for 39 minutes. So on one hand, like you see some positives here. It's like, okay, the offense is starting to come together. He wasn't intercepted, all that. But on the other hand, it's what you pointed out too. Like, why wasn't this more spread out? Like they were clearly the better football team, right? So I think we'll get obviously this game's going to be awesome, Saints Bucks. And you think, okay, well, Tampa can actually score and they can rush the quarterback like Chicago. But if you look at how the Bucks have played against the Saints this year, they have gotten handled. Okay. The Saints beat them by 35 times the last time. And how about this? 21 times in playoff history, a team is met for the third time. 14 of those times, a 2-0 team won. So, this is going to be interesting, man. Like, it's going to be interesting to see if the Bucks can finally snap it. Where do you come out on it? You think Tampa's got something real quick, and we'll get to them in a second. But do you think Tampa can kind of break that?
When was the last time Tom Brady lost 3 times to one team in a season? Again, I think, and we'll talk about the Buccaneers and everything, but, it's going to be a Tom game. Like, this is it. You can say whatever you want about the numbers. You can say what he's done all season, but Tom Brady is the postseason. That's what the hell you signed this guy for. It's what you went out. He changes. He elevates. That's what he's known for, okay, is his postseason record. All the stats, all the wins, all the bazillion things he's got. Plus, now he has a season where he left New England and the franchise did not – look, nothing came together. And then offensively, he goes and puts out one of his biggest seasons ever. This is Tom's stage right now, and this kind of a game is why the Tampa Bay Buccaneers signed him. So if you lose 3 times in one season to one team and you're Tom Brady at this point, that's a difference. That makes a big difference.
Charles, Tommy is a note taker, isn't he? Guess who else are note takers? The Harbaugh family in general, especially John. Listen, this game was awesome if you love football. Baltimore Ravens, Tennessee Titans. First of all, rematch of 2 extremely physical football teams.
Yep.
There's bad blood. The Titans were hopping on the Ravens pregame logo. They went into their house and punked them and beat them anyway. And then the Ravens banked it. The Ravens banked it very clearly because they decided to go into Tennessee, out physical the bullies. They beat the Titans 20-13. And Charles, the moment of the game, I know you will agree, the moment of the game. Tennessee's driving. They're trying to tie the game late. Marcus Peters makes a Marcus Peters interception. He goes down and immediately races to midfield. And the Ravens start hopping on the field with 2 minutes left in the game. The game is not over.
It's not over, right?
They were only up by 7. If they don't convert that game was not over yet. See,
right.
I thought that was peak petty. I love John Harbaugh saying afterward that it was, quote, the best win ever. That's a man who won a Super Bowl. Okay, this was personal. This was personal to John Harbaugh and the Ravens. And guess what? I'm here for it. I loved it. I loved everything about it.
I mean, let's be real. How could it not? And that this doesn't just go back to the earlier logo stuff during the season and John and Mike Vrabel, having their issue at midfield and all that stuff. This is the team. I mean, you had it all. The stars were aligned last year, right? And what happened? It was embarrassing to lose to this team last year. It was embarrassing to have Lamar Jackson questioned. It was embarrassing to, have the kind of season that you had for the Baltimore Ravens and then just get taken apart and have, Derrick Henry beat your head in. And then this game, it was the complete opposite. You had Mike Vrabel. I love the camera shot of Mike Vrabel in Derrick Henry's ear as they're walking. He's talking and he's in there saying, oh, he's coaching him. He says he's coaching right now. I mean, it's an interesting conversation that you have. This is a guy who ran for 2,000 yards for you, and all of a sudden you're having these issues. I mean, Baltimore clearly stacked everything to stop him and said, okay, let's see if Ryan Tannehill. The interception too that that Marcus Peters picked off. It was a trip. Okay, the guy tripped. Like, there's no question about it. It wasn't interference. I didn't think it was negligible contact. But what I thought was really interesting was that Tannehill threw the ball. Like when I watched it a couple of times, I'm like, that probably wasn't a great idea to throw that in the first place. I mean, that was tight coverage, and Tannehill made that decision. Now, I don't want to disparage Ryan Tannehill. I think he's done a great job in Tennessee. He's really, I think, rounded out a lot of his game. But you're right. I mean, it was personal for the Baltimore Ravens, and this was, if you had taken this game and slotted it last year, it would have fit perfectly. Because how they did it, how the Ravens did it, how Lamar did it. I told you, and I clearly was wrong here. I was like, this has got to be that game where Lamar puts up 300 yards passing because they have no pass rush and all these different Hollywood Brown. Instead, Lamar is run for 150 yards. He's the dynamic Lamar that's still running the ball. But I sat in this game and I just watched it and I thought, of all the mistakes that they made personnel-wise, the Tennessee Titans did in the offseason and how that all came back to haunt.
The two things that really stood out beyond what I've already mentioned is this. When you hold Derrick Henry to like 40 yards rushing, okay, you've done something. And they did it by stacking the box. They were like, okay, Ryan Tannehill, you're going to have to beat us. It was the Henry faced 8 defenders in the box on 72% of his rushes. All right, so that also shows that they were trying to run it down their throat anyway. All right. So this was a super physical game in that respect. Like, hey, we're going to do what we do no matter what you say. But I think the key here was at this time, the Ravens had their full complement of run stoppers. Calais Campbell, Derek Wolfe, Brandon Williams, their return mattered here. Like those guys matter in this game. Okay. And also, I'm impressed by the fact the Ravens were able to run the ball so well. They didn't have Mark Ingram, but they leaned into what they do best with Lamar Jackson, with the power stuff, the counter stuff. And, he was running between the tackles on these guys. And it was a fitting win for a player who'd been doubted as far as his ability to win a playoff game. Lamar gets his first playoff win. He threw an interception, but from a dual threat perspective, he gave them a lot of the things they were looking for. And I'm telling you right now, Baltimore is not a team that you're just looking forward to playing because they've settled back into who they are. And it's a lot more similar to last year than we thought they could get back to a month ago, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's one of the things that I think you and I talked about that was going to be really important fundamentally was Hollywood Brown becoming that piece of the passing game that we thought he was going to be coming into the season. It was like we watched him over the expanse of last year. We said, okay, this guy's ready to step into this. It's going to help with Mark Andrews. And that really happened over the last month of the season. Weirdly enough, elements of their passing game came together in the last month of the season. I feel like actually how they ran the football and some of the things that Lamar was doing came. It's like they ran into this lull offensively, after the first month of the season, it lasted for a while, and then they kind of figured it out and they worked their way through it. Now, I'm sure some of that had to do with, as we've talked about, Marshall Yonda not being there this year. Ronnie Stanley suffers an injury, all these different things. So I would not want to face Baltimore right now because I think they're feeling themselves. They got over a big, I think, kind of hump. Lamar's got the win. He played, and he played out of his mind, and now all of a sudden you have a team that's pretty juiced up and has forgotten and put to bed what happened to them in the offseason last year.
Charles, you mentioned wanting to take notes earlier. Well, Tom Brady, like we said, is a note taker, and they took care of business against the Washington football team and a player who said they wanted him in Chase Young. Tampa beat Washington 31-23 on Saturday night. They're going to advance to the divisional round against the Saints, which we already mentioned. But how about this, Charles? Tom Brady has now beaten 17 different teams in the playoffs. Isn't that an insane number? Unbelievable career. Obviously, the Bucs taking care of business is the story. But I also thought Taylor Heinicke was really interesting. I thought Heinicke's play was intriguing in a couple senses. Where did you come out on how Washington managed to stay in this game? Because even though they lost, I feel like all things considered, with everything they've been dealing with, okay, this has been a win season for Ron Rivera and a culture building season that he's been trying to like get this team to. Hopefully the people around him will make sure, like in the upper layers of organization, don't like do things and more things to hurt what he's trying to build, because he actually does have them from a football perspective pointing in the right direction.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I felt like this was probably one of those times where it didn't feel like a cliche to say that, hey, there has been a culture change. You can feel it. You can see it, the way they handle themselves, the decision they made with Dwayne Haskins when, Ron was like, look, this is a net negative. And I told Dan Snyder it's time to move on from this. Taylor Heinicke, I thought it was interesting. First off, he I don't know if it can last, but obviously he had a level of juice to him that clearly lifted that offense in a way that maybe hasn't happened all season long. The touchdown, the dive for the pylon was insane.
That was an awesome play.
Oh God, that was an unreal play. And I think to hear the players talk about him afterward was really striking. I mean, they were just extolling all these virtues of him and what he's brought to the team and how much he's meant to it. And this is a guy just got there. I mean, he hasn't been there that long. And I'm sorry, but there are other guys who've been in the organization for more than a year, and you never heard that. And so you get this guy who comes in and everybody's all juiced about him. I'll be very curious to see how much Washington leans into that, going into this offseason, and whether or not there's a bigger future there for him. Is he a starter? Is he going to be a 10-year backup or whatnot? But as you said about Brady, he is a note taker. It did not surprise me that he found Chase Young before the game. Thought that was pretty interesting. I think that it's still, I don't mind what Chase Young did, because I think this is kind of part of, it's learning, it's your learning process. And you know what, go at, fine. Say what you're going to say. They didn't get blown out. They played it. It was a good game. They played them tough.
But the thing that really stands out to me in this too is that like that Washington pass rush, it's not like Tampa was like, oh, we got to change who we are. We better run the ball to protect Tom. They actually didn't do what I said the Steelers should do. They went out, they threw. Like this team, Tom Brady threw 40 times. He took a little punishment. He was sacked 3 times. He was hit 7. And listen, Montez Sweat, total beast, man. Like that dude and Young are going to be good for a long time. But I was impressed, even though he got hit a decent amount, even though he got sacked 3 times, I was impressed that they were able to hold up. Like the offensive line was able to generally hold up enough to get this win. And that's something that is going to be important next week, because they're going to have to hold up against a Saints team that, I mean, it's been a while since I've looked forward to a game as much as that. There's a lot of great aspects of this one with 2 Hall of Fame quarterbacks, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's, Brady, Brees. You're going to see 2 guys, to me, this was sort of like when Peyton was coming to the end, and it's like Brady, Peyton. You're like, man, these are 2 guys that are defining the era. They're going to define the quarterback position for the lifetime of the NFL, we're always going to talk about these two guys. Well, Brady Brees it's the same situation. Statistically, Brees is beyond dominant and always going to be part of the conversation. Obviously, Tom's got statistics, he's got the Super Bowl wins. I feel like it means a lot to Brees. Like, to me, if you look at the two quarterbacks, you go, which guy really benefits more from a win here? I don't think there's any question to me.
That's a great point.
Drew Brees, he beats Tom in this situation and advances them forward. That becomes a guy where you're like, okay, this could be that John Elway moment in his career where I know he's already won one, but you and I both know the way Elway finished it in Denver
is what made his career.
It made him. And Drew Brees, you can say all you want about the numbers and everything else. And he's been great and he's won his Super Bowl, but let this guy go on a run here and beat Brady and maybe beat Rodgers. And, all of a sudden you're talking about it making him.
Well, for historical reasons, I actually think it's important, Charles, because, look, he's been first team All-Pro. He's been second team All-Pro. But one thing that really matters, for historical reasons, is all decade. And because of the presence of Drew Brees, because of the presence of Tom Brady and Peyton Manning, he's never been all decade. And he's one of the all-time great quarterbacks. That'll never change. That's in stone at this point. But that would be a nice thing just for his legacy to beat this guy right now. Just to say, hey, listen, he got beat on the all-decade stuff, but he was right there with those guys. You know what I mean? I think it's important. Not unlike how Peyton's second Super Bowl helped him, man. I think it matters. Winning more than one really does matter. And it'll be interesting to see what happens. You know what? The only thing that matters more than winning a couple of them is just doing it in the first place. And the Los Angeles Rams, after what happened to them in the Super Bowl against the Patriots a few years ago, they're in position they play well. They're trying to at least get that first one to Sean McVay. And they took a big step this week by beating the Seattle Seahawks on the road, 30-20. And listen, what's happening with the Seahawks and why these guys struggle so much against the Rams is crazy. 9-4 against the Rams are 9-4 against the Seahawks since 2015 now. And they just beat a Seattle team that went 7-1 at home this season and had 10 straight home playoff wins. This was a big win for a Rams team whose starting quarterback had a busted thumb and had to come in after their starting quarterback today in the game. John Wolford left and had to, due to a massive hit from Jamal Adams, and had to go to the hospital. As impressed as I was with some aspects of the Rams, that's how disappointed I was with the Seahawks, especially offensively in this football game.
Yeah, I think, look, first off, Brandon Staley.
He's doing a hell of a job, man.
Yeah, he's got some buzz to him. You want to talk about a guy who I'll say this for McVay, man. I felt like I know Wade Phillips a little bit. I know some Wade's guys, things like that. And I kind of felt like, it wasn't the cleanest kind of ending there for Wade, and kind of how things went the way they went, in the Rams organization. The things that, they kind of felt like Wade got a little stale and just kind of wanted to run. Hey, we're going to, what we're going to run. We're just going to beat you at it. And I kept hearing
that one high in the blitz, baby.
Yeah, right.
One high in the 5+ blitzes.
I remembered when that all went down, somebody saying to me, look, Sean wants to go get a guy that he really believes in, that he feels like is moving forward into the tenure, all these different things. And I thought to myself, I'm like, man, this is okay, he better make the right hire here, because this is a roll of the dice. If he picks the wrong guy and the guy is horrible or even mediocre, you're like, okay, well, can Sean evaluate talent hires, in terms of his coordinators and whatnot? And Zach Taylor goes to Cincinnati, and we've seen what's happened there, and we've criticized him at times for some of what he's done. So to have Staley come in and be what he has been and really raise the level of the defense the way that he has, given, frankly, salary cap limitations and certain positions that you couldn't just go out and spend and upgrade.
Yes. No picks.
Right. It's It's really been impressive. I thought that's kind of what I took out of this game was I'm like, okay, this guy, you hear about him all season long. You know the defensive, number one ranked defense and all these different things. And then you're like, but you got to do it in the postseason. If you can do it in the postseason, great. And the fact that they were able to do it in the postseason, they're getting their money out of Jalen Ramsey.
They actually are. He's been awesome.
I mean, Aaron Donald is making just like 6 Brinks trucks on a yacht full of money and still probably underpaid for what he is. Probably going to be Defensive Player of the Year this year. It's remarkable to see. I never thought the Rams could do this. I really didn't.
I didn't either. You thought more of them than I did, though. Like I thought that they were going to have to rely on their talent development of guys that weren't like first round picks. And they've actually gotten that. Like they've developed the talent.
Yeah.
And it's what you said earlier that really resonates. Like, oh, Sean McVay can develop players. He can evaluate coaches.
Yeah.
Oh, so they actually are okay trading away key assets because he's going to develop them on both sides. And like Staley, man, that was a hell of a pull. And you're talking about a guy whose units are performing well, but a lot of times when it comes to like getting that next step, where you come from matters as well. And like the fact that he's been linked up with McVay just this year, but more importantly, the fact he comes from the Fangio tree, like that's going to help that dude, man. Like Fangio's a good defensive coach. So I really was impressed with the Rams. But as far as the Seahawks go, it was striking, wasn't it, over the second half of the season?
Yeah.
How where the big plays went, like where were they after the first half?
Yeah.
Like I'll never forget me telling you that stat about Metcalf with the 20-yard catch thing. He didn't have like one in 4 weeks entering this game. He finally got one, but it was pretty reminiscent of what their issues were offensively, and some of them comments coming out after the game.
Yeah, from
the players. Woo, the bus was rolling over Brian Schottenheimer a little bit, my man.
Yeah, and I thought, I also thought it was interesting that, first off, them leaning so far into Russ that as the season went on, it became apparent, like, if he's not hitting big plays downfield, if Russ isn't, if they're not able to manufacture some of what the big chunk plays that he can help them make, the offense really sputters. They got a significant problem. So that, that's one angle of it. I also thought, though, it was interesting to listen to the Rams come out afterward. And Goff, because Goff is, I'm sorry, but he is not a spicy dude. Like he just is not. Like he's not a guy who I'm like, okay, man, he's going to talk some. Like Tom Brady will say some stuff. Like Tom will, he can hit you with some subtle stuff, but he goes after guys a little bit. For Goff to come out afterward and talk about the cigars that the Seahawks were smoking when they beat him earlier in, the regular season and all this stuff. And how, to have guys, and he wasn't the only guy to bring that up. The fact that multiple people brought it up again, to me, I'm like, okay, this is two things from Goff that I wasn't sure I'd be able to see as the season wound down. I was very disappointed with how I felt like he played as the season wound down. Number one, some resiliency to come in, to be upset clearly that he didn't start the game. He was clearly pissed about that.
Yeah.
To come in,
he could clearly play.
Yeah.
So
yeah, clearly he could play. And so to come in, show some resiliency when he got back in there, clearly take that job back moving forward into the postseason. There's no question that, Sean's going to have to lean into him now. Yep. And then to come out afterward and frankly, lip a little bit, be like, hey man, like that pissed us off. We weren't okay with this. And I'm like, all right, that's two things from Goff I'm not accustomed to seeing. Like, let's see some more of this.
Yeah, I agree, because I don't care what anybody says. The fact he didn't start that football game, like that's not a good look for him. Like that's a horrible look. No, like, he could clearly play. Yeah. Like, he played in the game.
Yeah.
Imagine like Deshaun Watson having us. He's playing. Mahomes, he's playing. Like, I'm sorry. Like, that's a horrible look. And I'm glad that he came out and played well. And I'm glad that he's been a little spicy, because that should have offended his football sensibilities. Great. Come play. Let's go. One more thing I want to mention about Brandon Staley real quick that also kind of sums up some of the issues that the Seahawks and their fans are having about their offensive play calling. Darius Williams' interception was not only the sign of like a well-coached team, because the moment that guy motioned over and that the ball was snapped, he just broke right on the football. That's good coaching. That's a great play. But it's also like, oh, that dude's seen this before.
Yeah.
Probably
Probably
not a great time to be breaking, to be this is the time to have wrinkles off that stuff.
Right.
Like he shouldn't have been able to anticipate that way.
You don't really, and they said it on the broadcast too, but I was like, yeah, man, that's true. Like you don't see like those passes get jumped the way he jumped it. Like that is like
I'm sorry, that's coaching.
Absolutely. No, absolutely.
Come on, how much football do we watch? I haven't seen anybody get a jump on a ball like that all season.
No,
they've run it too many times, and that other team's really well coached.
Yep. That's like a screen. I mean, it's like and that's the play. Like when you kind of watch it again, you're sitting there and you're like, man, they saw this on film probably repeatedly. They probably had it brought up like, hey, watch for this formation, watch for this movement. That was probably the, oh my God, he's going to do it. Like just like the way he jumped it, that anticipation, he had to be sitting there going, oh, this is unfolding exactly how we saw this, because there's no way you hit it like that, going 100 miles an hour, in stride, gone. The second the ball hits your hands, you have scored a touchdown.
Bro, that means they didn't he didn't just see that on tape. He practiced against that.
Right.
Probably, that's what that it's like, dang.
Yeah, that's
y'all didn't switch up enough, right? Like that's what when I saw that, I was like, oh, Pete knows. Pete has to know that that's not okay.
Listen,
Pete has to know that's not okay.
Look, this is one of the Deion Sanders. like this wasn't like this isn't like Champ Bailey. Like there are a couple guys where you're like, okay, they can anticipate like that,
right?
This, but that's what that looked like.
Not 97 Charles
Woodson, right? Right. Yeah, no, it's not. It's definitely not.
But shout out to the Rams, man. They took care of business. We're not trying to disrespect that. Hey, when you go into Seattle, a place that's hard to win in the postseason, even without fans, you get my respect. All right.
I know, right?
Right. Yeah. At the Green Bay Packers. It's going to be cold and you're from Los Angeles. Have fun. They know. Rams fans know that's going to be a tough one to win.
Oh my God.
Speaking of a tough one to win, though, I love the way this football weekend began, because Bills Colts was football. See, you know me, man. Yeah. It's about running the football. Ralph Wilson Stadium, which is actually a great place to watch a football game. If anyone, don't go there in December. Don't do that. And if you can go like in September, it's a great football pilgrimage. The fans there are awesome. They're very into it. You got wings. It's football. It's a stadium where, we grew up watching NFL Films highlights at this place. Like, just trust me when I say Ralph Wilson Stadium and that entire atmosphere is football. And I'm so happy for those fans as they watch. For the first time all season, they got to watch their Bills, the best team they've had there since the Jim Kelly era, get their first playoff win in over 2 decades by beating the Indianapolis Colts 27-24. They snapped a playoff losing streak. They lost 6 straight playoff games. Josh Allen wasn't even alive for their last playoff win in 1995, Charles. But now Josh Allen's won 7 straight, and the Bills haven't lost since Hail Murray. Buffalo's looking pretty doggone good, aren't they?
Yeah, and it's interesting because Baker Mayfield wasn't alive the last time the Browns won a playoff game in 1995. You've got these franchises with these fan bases that have gone through it for a couple of decades, like really, had to hang with a lot of failure, hang with a lot of mistakes, hang with some different coaches, some different quarterbacks, and to see it come to fruition for Buffalo. And also the fact that it was a good, this was a really good game. I as much as I've picked on Phillip Rivers this year, and I know I even, obviously I get the guy who says Ben looks like Phillip Rivers. Like, I'll give it up to Rivers. Like, I thought Rivers played a pretty good game. I felt like, look, they were there. Yep. They had their opportunity in this game. But again, there are just certain tenets of Buffalo this year that are, if I'm Cleveland, I'm looking at Buffalo and I'm like, man, look at how naturally they have built this organization over the last several years. I mean, they stacked it like every single year. And it's funny because when I talk to people inside the Browns organization, and I've asked them about, sort of Andrew Berry and executive of the year and stuff. It sounds to me from the conversations they're having with Andrew, that Andrew's like Brandon Beane's like the GM of the year. Like he's like, dude, look at like Brandon. Like I think he has looked at how Brandon Beane has constructed the Bills program, and just I almost think low key there's an element of patterning that might take place in how the Browns construct themselves compared to how the Bills constructed themselves. Because you look at the Bills and there's nothing counterfeit in that foundation. This is all real. Every element of that team is real. It's tough. It's well coached. The quarterbacks played well and really progressed into his role. The wide receiver who you went out and spent lavishly to get has been fantastic for you.
It's one of the best batteries in football. It's up there with Mahomes to Hill. Like it's an awesome battery. And I think the thing that really stands out about the way the Bills were constructed is that you're going to see other teams try to do this, where you draft your young quarterback and then you just immediately surround him with veterans within a year, where like you get your offensive line together, you get your number one receiver who's a veteran, right. You get your linemen who are veteran, like you sign guys, Cole Beasley, like you immediately do this so that he can grow within it and build confidence. And then the death cycle for quarterbacks, just like it happens with coaches, doesn't happen. Everything about the way they built that team is awesome, including the fact, and remember, I talked to Brandon Beane a few times. They built a team whose mentality fits their city.
100%.
It's the same reason I'm still wearing this hat.
Yep.
Jack McCloskey built a basketball team that fit the mentality of his city, and they'll be beloved forever because they became champions, and they represent Detroiters and their mentality.
Yep.
This Buffalo Bills football team fits the city of Buffalo. They play hard. You never hear stuff about Buffalo loafing to the – no. They play hard. And most importantly, they drafted a quarterback who fits their city too.
Yep.
Josh Allen loves Buffalo, loves the city, loves the fans, and they love him. And now what you've got is a city who's really they're really engaged in this team. And what does that mean for ownership? More money. When you build a team, guys, and I've talked to a number of evaluators who are smart, the smartest evaluators I've talked to over the last 4 months or so, heard it from a number of them. You try to build a team to fit the city you play in stylistically. Unless you're like Detroit and you really don't have, like, if you don't have a way of winning before, you're just trying to win games. But, like if you're a Lions fan, for instance, they could have it. If they had the 99 Rams offense, that would be the mentality you'd want to see going forward for a Lions fan. It will resonate 2 decades from now. Do you understand? But
right.
When you've had success in the past in a place, when you win that same way and that same style in the future, it really resonates, see? And that's the coolest thing about what's happening in Buffalo right now, man. That's the coolest thing to me. Where are you at on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's what's interesting too is you look at, there's definitely some teams where the football team is it is a cultish following with the fans. And, Green Bay is just like this. I mean, it's the only show in town in Green Bay. Buffalo, this is the only show in town in Buffalo. I think Kansas City's got some elements of that, even though obviously there is a baseball team in town. But you have, Cleveland, even though the Indians are there, and there is the Cavaliers, that's still a fan base where it is good, bad, or otherwise. It is they are going to ride.
Basketball. Yeah. Portland and basketball is the same way.
They will ride with you. Yeah. And the one probably disappointment, honestly, in this season is that you look at some of these situations where you damn well know the fan base. Think of the effect the fan bases can have on some of these games. I think Seattle was missing that. Pfft, you kidding me? Like seriously? Like absolutely. I mean, imagine Buffalo packed to the gills with all those honestly, fans. I mean, if the
pandemic wasn't around, I would have went to Buffalo this weekend. 100%. Even in December, even in January, I would have gone. That's how awesome. Like you knew that scene was going to be. Can we take a minute? Like we do need to talk about the Colts very quickly, though, right? Because all season long, I got to own this. I'm like, here's the Phillip Rivers 3 interception game. It's coming in.
I was with you.
It did. Okay, all right. Because I was just going to own that, but okay, we were together. All right. It didn't happen. He actually played fairly well in this game, and he deserves credit for that, man. I also thought this was really interesting, though. Part of the reason that happened, and I don't know yet if that was by design or the Bills did not get to Phillip Rivers. He wasn't sacked once and he was only hit once. So that definitely helped. and neither team could get to their quarterback. But I do know this. Next week, Buffalo's going to face Baltimore, and that's going to be a complete slugfest. That's something to watch, though. If they can't get home or generate or like keep Lamar in the pocket, that's going to be an issue. Before Indianapolis, back to them real quick. Sorry, I got sidetracked. If Phillip Rivers decides to come back, should he come back? Can they build on this, or should they go young quarterback, trust Frank Reich? Should Chris Ballard say, okay, Frank, what do you want to do?
I think okay, so there's two things here. Number one, there were some guys that dropped some balls and hurt Phillip in this game too. Okay, so I think Phillip played even better than really what even the statistics showed or some of the things that we saw. I think if guys hang on to some of those balls, maybe we're talking about a different outcome here. And now again, I think to me, again, it's a natural pivot point for this franchise in this season, unless there's just absolutely not someone there that you can get who you think fits either your ability to carry forward into this window for the next 4 or 5 years, or just build around for the next 15. I could see them bringing back Rivers, but I still think for some of these guys, this is the natural pivot point for a move to be made. And I don't know that the snapshot of Phillip that we saw here is representative of really what is going on in the totality of a season. Okay. So I would look at Phillip, and I think also the skill positions surrounding him. I think you have to look at a little bit. Yeah, a little bit. I really do. I think the backfield. I'm good.
The backfield's good.
Yeah,
Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, you figured it out.
And let's mention that the Colts have been one of the best running football teams in football for the last month and a half of the season. Buffalo held them to 78 yards, which is a good sign for the Bills as they head to face the Ravens. But all things considered, they definitely could use another top 2 receiver. I like Michael Pittman Jr. T.Y. Hilton's been dealing with injuries a little bit. Like he's been, they're a team that could use the Stephon Diggs infusion no matter who their quarterback is next year, right? Yeah. And if this is it for Phillip Rivers, because he was crying after, like, almost like he kind of knew this was it. All things considered, man, I enjoyed the Phillip Rivers experience. Like the game of football was more fun because he's been a part of it.
Yeah, well, he's, you want to talk about a guy who talks a lot of trash. Like, that guy is just run his mouth.
It's so rare though that he talks so much trash, but like he never. Like when I talked to like the Chiefs who played him, it was all fun.
Oh
like,
yeah,
competitive. But like it was I know you weren't saying it, but it's just like how rare is that? Like God talks as much as he does, but like it's not engendering like ill will. It's just kind of fun. I've enjoyed the Phillip Rivers experience. If this is it,
he's going to end up, going down in history as being a guy who has like a Dan Fauci type career. We're going to look at him. We're going to go, man, a lot of numbers, never quite got over the top, but geez, he was a really good player. A standout in an era where he was probably overshadowed by a lot of other quarterbacks who also were standouts. I truly believe this. If Phillip wins one Super Bowl, completely transforms.
Oh yeah,
probably the way we look at him. Yeah,
he's automatic.
Yeah, I agree.
And now it's just going to be a discussion. A lot of his numbers historically are really, really, really good.
Really good.
They're really good. And if he wasn't in, it'd be like, wow, like really, like, but on the other hand, he hasn't had like those. Honestly, you need iconic moments to get into the Hall of Fame too. That's why Eli is going to get in one day. Like you need those moments, and there just weren't a whole lot of them, man. Like he needed a playoff run. Like he needed, like even getting to the AFC Championship game where he just like had like that would have helped him, man. And it kind of stinks for him, but. That's going to be a discussion. But one other thing he does have going for him is his social game is on point. Over the years, Phillip Rivers has been an incredible interview. He has a lot of positive feelings among media members. I'm not saying that's going to get him in, but I'm saying like this is going to be more of a discussion than you guys probably think. Speaking of discussion, you want something? Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, like, I deep down believe that if Phillip Rivers ever decided to be the Tony Romo of college football, he would make $1 billion. He would make so much money as a college football analyst. And the reason why I say college football analyst, the few times I've talked to Phillip over the course of his career, he feels like that guy. He feels like a guy who people particularly in the college atmosphere, it's much more familial than really professional football is. They would glom onto him over. And I mean, I really believe if he wanted to have a 20-year career as an unbelievable college football analyst, and I think he could do what Romo does on the NFL level for the college game, that guy would, and he would just be unbelievably paid. But instead he wants to coach high school football. So like, all right, go do that and raise your 78 kids. I mean, that's like fine.
Speaking of, I mentioned that, it's important that be good verbal communicators. And, we promised we were going to answer some questions, and we're going to actually do that. We're going in an hour. We're past the hour-long mark. Brett's going to have to handle this, guys. I'm sure we'll be getting that shortly, but we appreciate you guys who are still with us. So we're going to answer a few questions quickly. Let's do them quickly, though, see, okay?
Yeah, so, yep, right on.
Jesse Bates asks us, a loyal listener. Thank you, Jesse. We appreciate you, man. He says, safe to say there will be street justice when the Titans-Ravens play each other next year. Yeah.
That's going to last. Yeah.
This is real. Like, we actually get a real rivalry of football, right? How cool is that?
Yeah, you got guys that are going to – it's all about our guys in the franchise going to stick around long enough to hold those grudges. And the coaches, unless Vrabel and Harbaugh get together in the offseason and they bury it, if they squash it themselves, I could see it ending. But otherwise, I think this is going to burn for a while.
All right, rapid fire. Question from Counter OKC. So do the Ravens pay Lamar Mahomes money for one playoff win? And yes, I know he has the MVP. I personally don't think he can match Mahomes. Like, Mahomes got paid for the Super Bowl as much as how great he was too.
Right.
Like, I think he can ask for something close, something probably between Watson and Mahomes.
Slot him between, right? Yeah, I think you slot him between Watson and I think you absolutely slot him between Watson and Mahomes. I think. Look, man, you pay him now. Like, I hate to say one game really makes a difference, but you got to understand it does. Like, that game really made a difference in the whole economy of, okay, can Lamar Jackson break through the wall in the postseason? That is a narrative that defines quarterbacks for decades, not being able to get that win.
And it would have become more of a thing if they lost too, man. So,
it's been huge.
Well, and he can also help himself by beating Buffalo on the road.
Yep.
He beat Buffalo on the road, and it kind of doesn't matter what happens to him against Kansas City, okay?
Absolutely.
So, provided Kansas City gets there, all right? Question from Albert Wilkinson. Hey, Albert, I know that you're a loyal listener. We appreciate you, man. Thank you. In fact, I'm going to name you the All Juice team right now on the spot. Appreciate you, man. His question is, All Juice listener team, can Lamar do it again next week? Natural transition. Buffalo and Baltimore. That's a tough guy. Alleyway matchup, Charles. Yes, they're just going to have to out-physical him. But one thing to remember, Baltimore's had a lot of success running the ball. The Bills haven't allowed a 100-yard rusher since like week 10. So he really – this week he really might have to do it through the air.
Yeah, well, and as you said – you can't have a situation if you're Buffalo where Lamar's clean. You just can't. If he's breaking contain or things like that, it's going to be a significant amount of problems. So look, the pressure absolutely has to get home. Like, you don't have the opportunity. You have to hit Lamar in this game.
Great question here from Marshall Sheets. Does the Browns secondary have a chance against the Chiefs receivers?
No.
With Andy Reid having 2 weeks of preparation, it's going to be tough.
and look, I do not.
Coach, though, so they'll be in the game.
Listen,
we'll see.
I do not want to look. I don't want to disparage the Browns, okay? But like almost every team in the NFL, pretty much every team in the NFL is going to have a hell of a time against the Chiefs wide receivers, and the Browns are going to head into this offseason all about pass defense, building the back end of that. Grant Delpit was the guy they drafted in the second round. They were monumentally happy, thought he was going to do great things, suffers an injury, doesn't even play this year. So that is going to be a lot of construction that goes into that secondary. And I mean, look, go and watch the Steelers streak. Okay. There was a reason why Pittsburgh was able to kind of fire up in that game. And a lot of it had to do with, some of what was going on in the secondary. So, and there's no shame in that, by the way. I mean, this is how it goes. You don't turn around a franchise. You got to build it piece by piece, and now they know what they need to identify.
All right. One more question before we get to the piece of breaking news here, Charles. From Kyle Coffee 11, which team that got eliminated this weekend feels best about where they are right now? That's interesting, because if you look at Indianapolis, it's like, all right, they got to get their quarterback situated. Seattle is like, okay, what's wrong with our offense? Like, we got an offensive coordinator change. What? Washington? There's a case for Washington. Like, we know they're ascending, and yeah, they got into the playoffs with a horrific record because they're in a bad division. But I think of all these teams that got eliminated, they're the team that's clearly ascending.
Yeah, I think again, quarterback. Like, what exactly is going to happen there? But I mean, yeah, I think
more quarterbacks than ever, though.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, there are more quarterbacks than ever. Did you see the quarterback is this the guy you want now? And but I think defensively, that unit is actually going to get better. It's I mean, there's a lot of youth there, and Chase Young, I expect, is going to end up being a defensive player of the year candidate pretty quickly, if not next year. So I would say of all the teams that exited, the one that weirdly, I could have never imagined that I would feel this way, but I really do. I think Washington is the one that has a chance to build into something bigger and better. All
right, a little breaking news, Charles. Multiple reports out there say Doug Pederson has been fired in Philadelphia. Oh, Charles is about to gloat. Flex on him, Charles. Go ahead. I know you want to. Eagles fans were giving you some grief in August, weren't they?
Yeah, I got murdered. I got murdered for saying that this guy was going to be on the hot seat this year. People were pissed, But look, this is. I'll be real with you. I think this has been brewing for a while. Like I think they expected a stride this year, and I think for what happened between Doug and Carson Wentz over the course of the season hurt Doug. And I'll tell you what, down the stretch, I would really, really question now if this completely remakes the Carson Wentz situation, because the one thing that someone said to me when we were talking about Wentz, I reached out to somebody who had been in the Philly organization, and I was kind of trying to find out if where he was now is like, whether or not they were interested or what and whatnot in Wentz. And we got into this philosophical conversation about whether or not Philly could just say, you know what, forget it. We're going to end up keeping him, and sit on it and deal with it. And he was like, yeah, he's like, you could do that. He was like, all you got to do is fire Doug. He's like, you fired Doug. And now if you're Howie Roseman, yeah, the GM, you go to Carson, you go, look, man, if he broke your trust, we're going to go find a guy now who you have trust in. So, but I'll also say this too. I'm be real. I don't think Lincoln Riley is leaving Oklahoma. Okay. I don't think he's leaving Oklahoma. I think Lincoln Riley thinks that Oklahoma can win the national championship next year from the people I've talked to. And, but I also know Howie Roseman has spent a lot of time talking to Lincoln Riley over the last year about Jalen Hurts, about other aspects of guys they were looking at draft wise. Howie has a really close pretty close relationship with Lincoln Riley. They know each other. They're familiar with each other. I think, if Lincoln Riley were to impress a guy, it could have easily been Howie Roseman. It'll be interesting to see where they go with this head coaching hire. But all the balls now that fly in, that are there up in the air because of Pederson going out the door. Wentz doesn't necessarily have to leave now.
He doesn't have to go.
If that was the problem.
There's a lot of money they owed him, man. Like, I bet you Jeffrey Lurie was just like, I'm not throwing this money down the drain. You're the problem.
That is, and you know what? Listen, do not discount what Terez just said. Okay, do not discount an owner sitting there going, "Wait, what?"
Well, he was just good 3 years ago. He was good under Frank Reich. Now he stinks. No. I'm not eating this money. You're the problem. I'm gonna hire somebody just for him.
Lurie was remember when they drafted him, you and I were talking to each other through that. We're like, okay, so Lurie's having dinner with the dude. Like Lurie, you and I have talked about that since then, how involved Lurie was in getting on board with Carson Wentz, being that guy and all the aggressive moves to get him. So do not discount an owner going, yeah, no, I'm not just peeling off 30 million in racks. And
I'm not taking that L. He's like, no, I'm not taking this L. You're taking the L. He's like, no, I'm not doing that. It's going to be genuinely fascinating to see how they handle, like, who they're going to hire. We're going to have you guys covered on that. We're going to be all over the Philadelphia coaching situation and many other things, right? But, for now, right, we'll be back in the middle of the week. We do enjoy everybody. We appreciate everybody that's joined us here. If you still need to scratch your podcast itch between now and Wednesday, Thursday, check out the Yahoo Sports College podcast. Check out Posted Up with Chris Haynes. The NBA's in full swing. I'm Still Standing, Sadiq Bey and Isaiah Stewart. And the Yahoo Fantasy Football Forecast. That's still rolling through the playoffs with betting and DFS advice. So follow me on Twitter at Terez Paylor. Follow Charles on Twitter at Charles Robinson. Give our ace producer, Brett Rader, a follow as well. Shout out to Brett for making this all work. And Charles, tell them what else they need to know.
Well, I'm going to also use 30 seconds of my time to make sure we get our guy Mully Salt, who I can't let us go through the first live stream and not very quickly address Mully Salt. He said, who's the next Detroit? Who's the next Detroit head coach and GM? Straight up, I will just say this, and we'll get into it later, but I will say I'm going to go back to the start of this whole thing. Robert Saleh, Ed Dodds were the two guys that a lot of people thought in the league would be a good pairing in Detroit. I still think Robert Saleh from the 49ers and Ed Dodds from the Indianapolis Colts could end up in Detroit.
Ed Dodds, somebody I've heard extremely good things about. So just from a culture standpoint, coming from that Ballard tree that matters, like he'll understand it. And as an evaluator, I've heard good things there. So just as a native Detroiter, at least from the GM perspective, that's a good, like, the GM is going to matter here, right? Because he's not just going to have to replenish the talent. He's going to help establish the culture. If it's Ed Dodds, that's a good one, all right?
And give us a 5-star review, please. Hook us up. If you love the live stream, please share it. Give us a 5-star review. Help us. We want to do this again. We'd like to make this a staple. It would be awesome.
We would.
It's a staple. So help us out. The more 5-star reviews you give us, the better the music's going to get at the beginning of the show. Yeah. Which matters.
The music was pretty dope. Like, we like that. It opened the Charles and I just like,
yeah.
That's the odds-on better favorite to be our next theme song. But remember, thank you again. We got a perfect 5-star rating on 1,000+ reviews. That's because you guys keep making the Yahoo Sports NFL podcast your primary source of pro football news. He's Charles. I'm Terez. We'll be back later this week. Hope you guys enjoy your week. Until then, we'll see you. Peace.